Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, and welcome to the InduSoft webinar for Fluke Deck 6.0. My name is Fabio Teresino, and I have the pleasure of co-hosting this webinar with Bruce Fuller, who is the product manager for data acquisition products from Fluke Corporation. The agenda is divided in three parts. First, Bruce will provide an overview about the Fluke Corporation and the partnership between Fluke and InduSoft. Then he'll provide an overview about the data acquisition devices provided by Fluke and talk about some case studies involving those devices in the Fluke Deck software, which was developed by InduSoft in partnership with Fluke as a tool to monitor and configure all the DEC devices listed in this agenda. Then I will take over the presentation and provide a brief explanation about typical architectures with the Fluke Deck software and the hardware for data acquisition from Fluke. And I will highlight some of the main characteristics and benefits from the Fluke Deck solution as a whole, with focus on the Fluke Deck software, which again is a tool designed by InduSoft in partnership with Fluke to very easily configure and monitor data from the data acquisition devices from Fluke. Then we will open for Q&A, and if anyone has any questions at any moment, please feel free to send them to us. You can access the WebEx bar at the top of your monitor and click either on the chat box or in the Q&A box and write your questions. And at the end of the webinar, we will read all the questions and answer them to anybody that asks these specific questions. With that, I'd like to again thank Bruce for co-hosting this webinar with us and invite you to start your presentation. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Fabio, and thank you for inviting me to this WebEx. And I want to thank the attendees that we have online for taking time out of your busy day or evening to spend time with us. My name again is Bruce Fuller. I'm a product manager here at Fluke, specifically Fluke Calibration, which I'll discuss later. Been with the company for quite some time and have all of the data acquisition products for Fluke. Next slide. For those of you who may not be familiar with Fluke, I wanted to give you just a brief history on the corporation and how it's grown. It was founded by John Fluke Sr. In his home in Springdale, Connecticut in 1948. He's a ex-Navy submariner, and he started out in his garage manufacturing power meters. And one of his largest contracts first coming on board was with General Electric. Next slide. Today, we have over 2,400 employees worldwide, and we're located, the corporate headquarters located 30 miles north of Seattle in a town called Everett. These products are distributed in over 100 countries, and the Fluke Corporation has a different brandings, as you see below. There's the Fluke banner, which is primarily oriented around the multimeters and power meters that you may well be familiar with. We have Fluke Biomedical, which services the medical markets. We have Fluke Networks. My particular group is the Fluke Calibration Group, and all of these companies fall under the Danaher Corporation banner, which also include companies like Keithley and Tektronix. Next slide. Here's an idea of some of the products that we supply worldwide. The top of the list is our calibration equipment and measurement standards. These type of products are sold into the national labs of various countries. We get into the premier level of metrology with these instruments, and these instruments are all used to calibrate, for example, all the instruments you see below that big box there on the right. We also have process calibration tools for the field calibration of processes and factory equipment. the regular multimeters that you see with electricians oftentimes, and then biomedical equipment. One of our newer entries is the thermal imaging instrumentation that we have, the thermal cameras that are used in very broad spectrum of markets, anywhere from simple housing energy studies up through thermal preventative maintenance issues with large equipment. Next slide. And again, my group is the calibration group, and we're pretty proud to say that we're one of the largest calibration-focused businesses around, and again have global sales, manufacturing, and service throughout multiple regions. We have solutions for calibration and electrical calibration. We have temperature calibration standards, and we have pressure and flow calibration. Those are our three primary discipline areas. On the data acquisition side, again, part of the calibration group, we started off in 1974 with John Fluke Sr. putting out the very first, as far as we know, commercially available microprocessor-based data logger. From there went on, we were also one of the first to offer an off-the-shelf wireless logger solution for 900 megahertz and 2.4 gigahertz in 1994. When we started getting into our other products, we offered up the first Ethernet-only data acquisition system. In other words, there was no other way to communicate with us to 32 or USB or anything at that time. That was in 1996, and it was a very successful product line called NetDAC. The follow-on to that was an introduction of a large frame Ethernet-only product called the 2680 series. And that's where we ran into InduSoft after looking around the block, and we found that we had some needs that were unserved, and so engaged InduSoft to work on the Fluke DAC product, which I believe was around 2000 when we launched that, and that was Fluke DAC 1. Our newest introduction, which you'll see more of, is the 2638 and the 1586, and that was just launched about 15 months ago. It's doing quite well as our newest addition to our data acquisition family. One of the things that we have in common with all of the instruments you see there is that they have what we refer to as a universal input. We have connectors that go in the back of each of these that you'll see later, and they accept any type of the signals you see there. So you can put any of those signals or sensor types on any of the open channels, and then advise the instrument what you have connected to that channel, and you have then that channel activated for that type of sensor or input. The analog modules that we have, or the analog inputs that we have, come in basically 20-channel blocks, if you want to consider it like that. With the universal analog inputs, and here's some more detail on that. DC voltage up to 300 volts on many units, AC up to 300 volts, all the thermocouples, 2- and 4-wire RTD, resistance, frequency, current, and thermistor type inputs. And these are common to most all of the products that we have. The newest product I mentioned is the 2638A, and that's the Hydra Series 3. Now, we have a sister product to this called the 1586, which is part of our temperature discipline group. They're out of American Fork. They've been tailored for various specifications depending on the market need. 2638 is expandable, comes base with 20 channels, but is expandable in 20-channel increments up to 60 input channels. These are all relay isolated channels, so very high isolation, limited to very few ground loops. Our hallmark specs here that we have are the thermocouple accuracy, which has been the hallmark of all of our data acquisition products. And in this particular case, we've increased our DC accuracy up to 0.0024%. So it's a highly accurate device, and can be used not only as a data acquisition scanning product, but also, if you notice in the lower right-hand corner there's a DMM button. So what we've built into this is the fact that if this is not being used as a a recording device, which you don't use them all the time. Many people don't. They can also act as a very, very accurate 6.5-digit DMM. When you push the DMM button, which you see on that screen in front of you there, the whole soft menu turns to a DMM-like menu system, which would be volts, amps, ohms, and various filter configurations. Also, one thing of note here is the Category 2 safety rating that we have on these all of our products, which I believe, to my knowledge, we are about the only one that has that. That's a safety category voltage rating, which basically allows us to get up to 300 volts on the front and 150 on the back with that safety category rating. A lot of people don't necessarily appreciate that, but when you're on the factory floor, that's a very important factor in any instrument. So that's the overview of the product. We have, in addition to the analog modules, we have some 20 math modules that are also built into that. Now, here's a quick visual on the instrument. On the upper left-hand side, you'll see that there's a standard DMM type inputs that can be used for the 300 volts or 4-wire measurements. Over on the right, you have your indicator buttons telling you what you're doing as far as the instrument is telling you what state you're in if you're recording or scanning or in your channel setup or DMM mode. Now, if you look in the middle of the picture there, you'll see that there's a gray connector pushed into the inside the unit. That's one slot of 3 slots. There's one slot above, one below. Those are the expansion slots. So those could potentially be filled with up to 60 channels of information. So that's kind of an overview to give you a feel of what the instrument's like. We also have that front USB for collecting data. This is a standalone product, by the way. You don't need anything to drive it. It's all the menu systems are in that screen that you're looking at. Next slide. Here's a picture of the input modules, the input module and the relay board that you see in the lower portion. Those are both the part of the expansion kits and also replaceable by the user should anything go wrong in the future if, on the relay cards or anything like that. In the one point to bring out on the input connector in the upper right, that is probably the most popular item that we sell in addition to these 2638s. The reason is, if you notice, there's no electronics in there except for a cold junction compensation for thermocouple sensor. What that means is that you can get multiple connectors like this, which are fairly inexpensive, and if you're doing tests around your factory or in whatever situation you have in your laboratory, and you want to pre-wire something and assign channels to various types of signals, you can do that, take your time to wire it, and then leave it there and disconnect it from the instrument and go to another station where you have another connector like this. It's a very time-saving accessory, very much a time-saving accessory for us. Yeah. So next slide, Fabio. Okay. Here, I won't go through these specs, but I will just let you look at these. I wanted to put these together for you. Scan speeds around 46 channels a second. That's maximum with DC. Some of the highlighting areas, again, are the 0.5 degrees C accuracy on thermocouple and our 0.0024% on DC in a Category 2 safety rating. The rest of the items you can see there if you have a particular interest. One thing before we go on, the chart on the lower corner is a charting of 4 channels that we can do on the instrument. Again, being a standalone instrument, you may want to take a look at channels as they're being recorded, so you have the ability to change that. You also have all of the data, as in the upper screen shown there, of the data that's coming in. Plus, you can also do concurrent statistics on that screen. Next slide. Quick overview of the modeling system, just basically 2638/60 for 60 channels, 40 and 20 channels. The expansion kit down below is the 20-channel kit, and then all the other accessories you may expect to find with an instrument of that type, including the extra input connectors and relay boards. Okay, now that we've gone through some of the overview of the hardware, my favorite part is really the applications that we have been involved with, and these next few slides are just broad examples of applications that Fluke has been involved in since day one on the data acquisition front. And then what I'd like to do after that is I'll show you a couple of modifications and that have been done using the InduSoft's FlukeDAC package. Here's some utilities applications, and you can see the various things that we do in the production phase of gas or water type production, doing monitoring, bearing monitoring, vessel jacket temperatures in some of the nuclear type facilities, cooling systems, heat dissipation studies. One of my favorite ones, which you'll also mention later, is in the electrical utilities market. This is where we're monitoring high voltage switches, where you might be in a distribution yard and you're bringing in, several kilovolts of voltage that need to be switched to another area. And what this particular monitoring system did was monitor the air pressure or oil pressure, which drives the conductor into the switch, because you can't, as you might imagine, that there's a lot of a concern over connectivity there, so they can't have anything conductive. So they monitor the pressure switches, the pressures inside the vessels that slam those switches shut, in more of a preventative maintenance and monitoring type of mode. That's one that I tend to like as a point of interest. On the next slide, we have the pharmaceutical area, where we do a lot of work actually in the pharmaceutical area, primarily in chamber validation for a lot of different groups. We also go through and of course monitor process temperatures and things of that nature. Some of the engineering efforts we go through in experiments where they're monitoring teeter points and temperatures and pressures. Again, another slide here will bring us up to aerospace applications. Probably one of the largest application areas, in fact it is, I think, the largest application area for Fluke data acquisition products. Primarily we end up centering around defense contract folks, people who get into satellite work where they're monitoring large vacuum chambers and testing satellites inside those chambers where they need to have temperature profiling across the entire area. We do engine test cells for turbine applications, turbine manufacturing and validating. A lot of different things that are done. The heat treating, the AMS 2750 area, we also do a lot of work in that area as well. So aerospace is another big application area for data acquisition. And then the last one I think here, I believe it's the last, is the electronic manufacturers, that's us. That's people like Fluke. And in those types of areas, there's a variety of area, depending on what group you're with, a quality group, engineering group, manufacturing type thing. You can see some of the applications that we've gone in and helped solve some of the measurement problems and issues, all the way down into some of the wave solder machines that need to have certain heights and preheat zone temps and things of that nature monitored, especially when they're more getting out of control and you need to monitor. So we do a lot of different applications overall. And that brings us to, I do believe, the Fluke DAC application itself. Fluke DAC is, as you know, something that we have had InduSoft put together for us to communicate to all of our equipment. And when we came out with the 2680 in around 2000, I believe it was, we recognized that what we really needed was one application that had the flexibility and scalability to not only service the instrument, which is just the primary get it out the door thing, but more importantly to service the customer and the growth of their application and our future products. So after an extensive review of people out in the marketplace, we selected InduSoft to provide those features for us in the Fluke DAC application. And I do have to say, Fabio, that we're very happy we made that decision in retrospect. Some of the basic customer needs we were trying to solve at the time was, of course, to have it work with all of our data acquisition equipment, And we figured we wanted to be able to support up to about 2,000 channels. Now, in actuality, it will support more than that, but that was kind of the limit we put. And we have had many customers bump into that limit and have accommodated their growth from there. We wanted an OPC server so we could communicate with other programs, and a web server so we could have web interface and viewing from various points. Some of the things that we wanted, of course, were the basics. We needed to have basic configuration. We wanted to have some basic trending. We needed to get data in and out. We often wanted to see alarm annunciations as they happen. And so those are some of the things that we went to InduSoft for. And again, they've done a very good job. We've had a wonderful relationship with them. Here's one of the case studies. And I only have this one Web Studio example for you, but this is a example of what I would call pages that were built into FlukeDeck using the InduSoft Web Studio. And as Fabio will tell you shortly, the FlukeDeck application is all put together and is installed. It installs the entire program, and it can be edited and what I call broken apart for editing with the Web Studio program. What we have here is an air defense contractor who does heat treating and heat stress testing for various materials and items that they make. So what we've got up in the upper left-hand corner is something that the customer added, and each one of those blocks represent a room. And each one of the dots in those blocks represent an alarm point on an oven, or actually an oven. On the right-hand side is the map layout of the facility. And this was primarily put together not so much for any kind of active involvement, but this was actually put together, if you will, for the night crew to watch the alarm settings on this entire facility from one place. Now the graphic down here in the bottom is actually Web Studio, and that's one of the pages that is put together, and that's how the customer did that. So the outside is the Web Studio, and the internal part is the page that you see on the upper left. So that's one that was very well done, I thought, by the customers themselves. I have another one that I want to tell you about, and it relates back to the high voltage switching station, where a customer took our FlukeDeck Basic and then took the InduSoft Web Studio and again what I call breaking it apart, and added in a lot of different elements, not just the graphics, but also ways to automatically feed data up to their large storage facilities where they host all the data that they collected. And this was from a power distribution company in Italy. And this is where they also monitored for the preventative maintenance reasons those large switches that were driven with air pressure and oil to connect those very, very high voltage switches together. They did that plus a lot of other performance monitoring things. Very impressive application. I had the pleasure of going to Milan to see that at one time. But it's just another example of how being able to modify an already existing program with all the underlying infrastructure in it was very quick, very cost effective for this company and others who've done similar types of work. So I think with that, those are the overview of the hardware, the application areas, and a couple of case studies here that we've gone through. And I think with that, I'd like to turn it over to Fabio to go through and show you the rest of the FlukeDeck program. Fabio.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bruce. I do appreciate, and thanks for the comments about the partnership with InduSoft. It's definitely mutual. We appreciate the partnership very much, and I'm sure it will continue to be a successful one.
I'm sure.
Getting started here, a brief overview about the architecture. As Bruce mentioned, Fluke has many different series of devices with several unique advantages and data acquisition devices with a lot of accuracy and ability to work in a standalone mode and store information locally on the devices. And the Lookback software was designed in partnership with Fluke, pretty much with the concept of being a single point of configuration and monitoring for one or several devices connected to the software through any TCP/IP interface, wired Ethernet, Wi-Fi, any TCP/IP interface. So about 10 years ago, we released the first version, 10 or 15 years ago, and we have been evolving this application over time. And as Bruce mentioned, the Lookback software is simply an application designed with the standard InduSoft Web Studio. And this application was put together with three main points to bring values to our customers. So three major value propositions. The number one is ease of use. So it is an application as intuitive as it gets and fully functional. We are able to take advantage of features in the InduSoft Web Studio, which allows us to customize the application during the runtime. So it's a fully functional application. And during the runtime, not having to go back to the development environment, customers can add any of those Fluke devices to the application and configure them and monitor values from them on the trains, get alarm conditions, generate alarms, send alarms by email. So it's a fully functional application, but it's very easy and intuitive to use. So virtually without training, in a matter of seconds or minutes, a user can connect to the device, find devices in the network, and monitor data from those devices, online data and history data, using a cohesive graphical interface in Lookback. The second major value proposition is flexibility. Even though it is an application easy for customers to use, it is quite comprehensive and provides a lot of features. Not only configuration, but also monitoring of online values, generation of reports. We can very easily combine history data from different channels, different devices, and create automatically reports that can be saved into CSV files and exported to Excel, for example. The system has the ability to send notifications by email. You can visualize the screens from remote web browsers. There is interoperability with any other systems through standard technologies like OPC and DDE. And at last but not least, it is an application built with InduSoft Web Studio. So it brings the unprecedented flexibility for Lookback users to purchase an InduSoft Web Studio standard development license and customize the standard application to their own needs. So they can you can create new screens, you can modify the existing screens, you can link the application to other devices, to PLCs, barcode readers, RFID readers, robots, whatever it is, and merge the standalone Lookback application into your own HMI SCADA project and provide a single point of interface, not only for the Lookback devices, but also to other data acquisition systems, if any, and customize the screens just like Bruce mentioned in some of the examples here. That's a huge advantage to build the Lookback application on top of a standard development environment like InduSoft Web Studio. And the last value proposition is scalability. As Bruce mentioned, each one of the devices have local capabilities for configuration and even data storage. But when you bring this information to Lookback running on regular PC, we increase drastically the scalability and in memory availability and the ability to consolidate information from different channels, from different devices, and create reports combining this data. So recently we released Lookback 6.0, which keeps support for the devices previously supported by FlukeDeck 5.0 and added support to new devices from Fluke, and Bruce talked a little bit about them, which are the 2638 and 1586 series. So we keep in FlukeDeck 6.0 backward compatibility to configurations made in previous versions of FlukeDeck, keep support for all the devices that FlukeDeck 5.0 supported, but in addition to that, also implemented support to the new devices available from Fluke. Moreover, it provides the ability for you to receive remote notification by email or text messages on mobile devices, and also for remote users to visualize information using a remote web browser. Again, leveraging built-in features from InduSoft Studio to the FlukeDeck application. It also has a built-in interface to export data from the devices to CSV reports, and it's very easy to customize those reports. And from the interoperability point of view, it also leverages the standard OPC client DA, OPC client HDA, and DDE server modules from InduSoft Studio to expose data that FlukeDeck is reading from any Fluke device to external systems. Could be Excel through DDE, could be a trend link through OPC HDA, could be LabVIEW through OPC DA. So it's an open architecture, full interoperability with other systems using standard technologies and leveraging features built in the standard InduSoft Studio. So in a nutshell, that's the basic architecture. Here I list some of the main features at a glance. So as Bruce mentioned, support for instrument configuration and up to 2,000 channels. We support all the different FlukeDeck families for the data acquisition devices, including the new ones available now in FlukeDeck 6.0. Local DDE and OPC server for interoperability, web server to provide online data and graphical pages to remote web thin clients, remote users using just a web browser, and all the capabilities, the requirements from the specification are available in the application, and during the demo, I will quickly demonstrate each one of them. When you purchase a DEC device from Fluke, you also receive the FlukeDeck DVD, and in this DVD, you will install that there is a setup, and this setup pretty much installs the standard InduSoft Studio, and the only difference from a regular InduSoft Studio installation is the fact that the application, the default application, is the FlukeDeck application designed to configure and monitor the Fluke devices. So after installing the FlukeDeck software from the DVD, you automatically have shortcuts on the desktop to launch FlukeDeck, and it automatically launches the runtime version of the FlukeDeck application, and you are ready to monitor and configure the devices. When you install the software for the first time in your computer, it runs in evaluation mode or demo mode, and it allows you to use the FlukeDeck software with no restrictions for 40 hours. 40 hours actually running the software. So if you run 1 hour each day, it would last for 40 days. So during those 40 hours, you can pretty much play with the software and evaluate the software. And there are no restrictions whatsoever. It runs in what we call the full edition mode. When the 40 hours expire, then you would need to license the software in order to keep using it. And you have two licenses options. There is a full version and a light version. And as you see here in the table, the full version supports all the capabilities available in FlukeDeck. Several devices connected at the same time, virtually unlimited points, has been fully QA'd up to 2,000 points, trained charts, full screen trained charts, so full capabilities. if you purchase the Lite edition, then there are some limitations. You can monitor one device at a time. You can show up to 4 pens at a time in the trend control. You have DDE, but you do not have websync clients, nor remote notifications through email, nor OPC interactivity. You have online alarms, but not history of alarms. And again, you don't have remote notification. So you have the light version and the full version. And when you when you receive the DVD, in the DVD itself, there is a label with the activation code, and you can go online, follow the instructions on the DVD itself, and go online to get the license to FlukeDeck automatically from the InduSoft website. So it's a self-serving licensing mechanism, either to the Lite edition or to the full edition. And if you purchase the Lite edition and eventually want to upgrade to the full edition, you just need to install a new license, but the software remains the same. And at the end of the presentation, I will show another table with all the options you have and add-ons for FlukeDeck as well. So an overview about the graphical interface, the GUI, the graphical user interface. As you see here, it's a very clean, intuitive, easy-to-use interface. On the top, you have a menu bar, and in this menu bar, you'll see different icons for different areas of FlukeDeck. On the left side, you have a tree view where you pretty much add your modules, your devices, your channels, and I'll provide a little bit more details in a demo about that. And on the left side, on the right side, you have pretty much the configuration of the devices, modules, channels, trend screens, alarm screen, whatever you are doing on the context. So first about the security system, again, FlukeDeck leverages the security system from InduSoft Web Studio and allows you even to create users, remove users, block users, or set different passwords for the users during the runtime. So for simplicity, there are 2 levels of users, users that have view-only capability and users that have view and configuration capability. And you can define, you can add new users just by clicking on the button and define the level just by checking the checkbox enable configuration or not. And everything done from that point on will be based on the user logged on the system, the reports, the alarms, the trains, the emails, and everything else. On the tree view, as you see here, you have a hierarchical view of the devices, including their modules and their channels, as well as computed channels, which are like virtual channels, not physical channels, that can generate information based on expressions that you define in FlukeDeck itself. So the configuration is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Number 1, you just click here in Insert and select the type of device you want to insert. Number 2, you add modules for those devices. Most of the Fluke devices are very flexible and allow you to have a number of modules. And number 2, you add the channels. You configure the channels available in each one of those modules. And as you see here in the tree view, you have a hierarchical view of the devices, modules, and channels. And then after that, it's just a matter to configure the settings for the channels. And I will demonstrate how easy it is to do a configuration in a few minutes here in the demo. There is a very nice feature as well called data file configuration, which is pretty much an easy way for you to generate reports automatically. So you can define as many reports as you want, define which channels from which devices should be saving data to each report, and define even how those reports should be generated, by day, by period of time, by size, by number of lines, and so on and so forth. You also have the option to not only download, but also upload configurations to the device or from the devices respectively, not only using a TCP IP link, but also using a USB interface for FlukeDeck devices that support the USB interface. And you can also upload not only the configuration, but also the history data that has been stored locally on the device in a store and forward mode. On the monitoring screens, you can stop and start the scan. And keep in mind, everything I'm showing are screens designed with InduSoft Studio, but they are fully functional to support one or multiple devices communicating with this application during the runtime. So you can start or stop the scan from each module individually or for all the modules at once. You can get history information from the devices per device, per module, or for the whole system, and import this information into CSV reports that you configure in the system itself. You can also use an interface called Spy Channel, which allows you to visualize online values in real time from different channels, from different devices at the same time. The next interface is the trained, and again, it leverages all the nice built-in features in the standard trained control from InduSoft Studio. So you can zoom in, zoom out, you can split the pens in different channels, you can merge them in a single Y-X, you can dump the information to the printer, you can create profiles with a number of pens and save those profiles and reload those profiles in the future, so you do not have to manually add and remove each one of the pens individually. And you can also visualize the trained interface in full screen mode, taking the whole monitor area. Alarms interface, you can visualize not only the online, but also the history of alarms if you configure Lookback to do so. And filter those alarms by period of time, module type, many different criteria, and then generate reports, either dumping the alarms into PDF reports or sending them directly to the printer. Finally, in the web settings configuration, you can simply click on this button to run a web server, and then you'll be able to visualize data from the devices from a remote web browser. And you can also configure your email settings here and define the email addresses or phone numbers for recipients that should receive notifications by email or text messages when alarms are generated by the devices. So talking about interoperability in a little bit more details, as mentioned before, Lookback supports DDE and OPC out of the box. DDE is still very popular in lab applications where it is required to visualize, to link data from the DEX in real time with Excel, usually in Excel worksheets that are used for many different purposes. And since Lookback is an OPC server, you can open Excel on the same computer where Lookback is running, and by using this syntax here in any Excel cell, you can visualize in Excel the value from the respective channel in real time. So for example, if you just write equal unit DDE vertical slash DB MV1 means module 1. The number 10 between square brackets means base channel 10, and CH1 means channel 1. So this syntax here pretty much will display in Excel the value from the channel 1, module 1 from the device base channel 10. And using the syntax, you can pretty much show any channel value in Excel. OPC server is also built in the product, not only OPC DA, but also OPC HDA, and allows you to expose data, either online data or history data, to external systems, like in this example here, providing data to an external trained link software, which extends the training capability from Lookback to this external software and provides additional capabilities native from trained link. And Lookback has the ability to very easily and naturally expose the online data and history data from Lookback to trained link or any other system that supports the standard OPC interface. Finally, but not less important, there is, again, the huge flexibility and advantage to customize the standard Lookback application. So some customers use Lookback as it is because it's fully functional, but many customers take advantage of the fact that they can purchase an InduSoft Studio development license and aggregate their own custom screens to the standard Lookback application. So they can create screens with their tanks, their ovens, bring data from different devices, from PLCs, send data to different devices, pretty much merge the Lookback application with their own HMI SCADA application, just like you can merge any 2 or more InduSoft Studio applications. So you can customize the Lookback to your particular needs. Talking about the runtime editions and add-ons, so Fluke sells the Lookback directly through its channels, and they offer, as mentioned before, 2 editions, the full edition with no limitations, and the light editions with the limitations that we discussed before. 1 device only, no full screen mode for the trained, no remote notification for alarms, no remote visualization on the web browsers, and disables the ability to export data from the trained as well as OPC server. And again, you can always upgrade from the light version to the full version and then get all the capabilities from the full version. In addition to the Runtime Edition, you can optionally also purchase the standard development package from InduSoft and customize, modify the Lookback application and add your own screens, your own interfaces to the application. There are also part numbers to upgrade Lookback from previous versions to the most current version, not only the full edition, but to the light edition. And there is the add-on to TrainedLink to the most current version, 10.0, and also a part number to upgrade the external TrainedLink from an older version to the most current version. So those are pretty much the main part numbers involved with Lookback. And now I would like to show a quick demo. So after you install Lookback in your computer, you will find an icon for Lookback in your desktop. And by double-clicking on it, it will launch this interface, which again is an application designed with InduSoft Studio. You can open existing projects or create a new project here during the runtime and give the name you want for your project during the runtime. And you can then, from this project, add devices to Lookback. So, for instance, in this case here, I will select a Hydra device, which should be available on the IP address 10.168.23.200. And when I hit next, it pretty much shows me it's going to try to connect to the device. And when I hit next, it finds the device in the network, uploads automatically the basic configuration from the device. So it automatically recognizes the module in the slot 1 and in the slot 3. And if I hit finish, it automatically adds the modules and the device here to the tree view. Then I can go to any one of those modules and insert channels to those modules. So let's say I want to add 5 channels here. And as you see, the tree view automatically updates to show the channels. And then I can configure each one of those channels individually. So I can say this channel 101 is voltage DC with the range of 1 volt. And there is a very nice feature where you can select several channels at the same time just using the Shift key. And then you can configure settings and apply those settings to several devices at the same time. So right here, I set those 4 channels to VAC, while the channel 101 is still in VDC. So I do not have to necessarily configure each one of the channels individually when they share the same settings. So very intuitive, very easy to use configuration interface. And here on the root level, you have also this option to enable data simulation. So if the device is not available for whatever reason, FlukeDeck can simulate data so you can test your reports, your interfaces before connecting to the actual device. And here in data file configuration, you can pretty much define as many reports as you want. You can keep inserting reports to your configuration. And for each report, you define which modules and which channels you want to add to the report, and how do you want to break the report, by a particular time in the day, or duration of time, or file size, or even number of lines. And FlukeDeck will be automatically generating those CSV reports to you with the data collected from the DEC devices. Also, important point I didn't mention, the FlukeDeck devices are able to acquire data at a very fast speed, a very fast rate, faster than it would be feasibly possible for a software to read through the Ethernet interface, but it has the ability to buffer, to save this data locally on the device itself, and the FlukeDeck software will automatically download this data from the device in chunks and dump this data into the CSV reports with precision of 1 millisecond in the timestamp. So after the configuration, you can come here to the communication screens, and you can enable the scan for each one of the devices individually, or for all the devices if you hit the play button at the root level, and it will scan all the devices in the network and start communicating with all of them. So if I go, for instance, to the module 1 here, it collects the data from all the channels available in this module 1 and shows the online values from this channel here on the screen. On the webinar, you probably have a delay, but I can see the values channel, the channel values changing on my screen at a very fast rate here, perhaps 10 times a second or so. You can also use the SPY interface to select different instruments and visualize values from the different modules, as well as digital values from the IOs available in each one of the modules, and computed channels, if any, configured in the device. Then you can also use the trains interface and visualize values from the pens available on the devices. You can visualize trains in history mode or online mode. You can alter screen scale. You can remove pens on the fly. You can add pens on the fly, zoom in, zoom out, save profiles, load profiles, use all the features built in the train control from InduSoft. Alarms as well. If you configure alarms, you can visualize and acknowledge online alarms, or visualize the history of alarms, filter them by period of time, by number of days, and so on, and also dump them into a PDF report or directly to the printer. Finally, just by clicking on this button, it will run a web server. Then you can visualize the screens from a web browser. And you can also configure here the email settings, including authentication, if you want FlukeDeck to send alarms by email or text message as remote notification. So in a nutshell, those are the main features, the main capabilities available in FlukeDeck. And again, it was designed to bring ease of use, flexibility, and scalability, and also the ability for you to customize it, either use it as it is, as a standalone application, or using the Software Studio development environment to customize it and add your own screens to the existing screens available on the application. So with that, we'd like to open for Q&A, and if you have any questions, feel free to write them either in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and you can access those interfaces using the WebEx bar at the top of your monitor, and Bruce and I will be happy to go through your questions and answer them. So one question here is, so we need a dedicated PC running the software to remotely connect to the FlukeDeck server required? It's a good question. In order to run the FlukeDeck software, you need to have a PC where you run the software. It does not need to be a server-graded computer. Could be a notebook, could be any PC running any operating system currently supported by Microsoft. XP is not officially supported anymore, but we have customers running still on Windows XP. It's compatible with Windows XP, and definitely Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 2003, 2008, 2012 server, 32 or 64 bits. So any Windows operating system, and the device themselves have the capability to store data locally. So even if FlukeDeck is not running, is not connected to the devices all the time, you could have the device running and collecting data locally, and eventually you run FlukeDeck, connect to the device, and FlukeDeck automatically downloads the information from the DEC devices into the PC, and then you have the ability to visualize it remotely from a website, generate CSV reports, send online remote notification, everything that you can do from FlukeDeck. So FlukeDeck runs from a PC, but does not need to be a server-graded PC, and does not need to be necessarily connected to the device 24/7, because when you are disconnected, the device has the ability to save data locally up to the points, up to the capacity of the internal memory on the device, and then eventually when FlukeDeck connects to it, FlukeDeck downloads the data and shows online data on the screen. So one question here, what is the advantages or differences between the DEC and over a PLC? And Bruce, maybe you want to take on this one?
Well, a PLC system for most applications is an active control device that I think we had that kind of comment like that in another session. And the PLC basically is a system that needs its own programming, and it's a more active device. The data acquisition products we have are primarily very accurate logging systems that are used for wide scale monitoring. So yes, it's not a PLC application necessarily, and I know that there's a lot of people that work with Web Studio that do use PLCs, but it's not for everyone. and as Brian, I think it is here, pointed out, it says it's probably more than what he needs, but he did thank us for our time.
Right, and again, in many systems I've seen FlukeDeck and PLCs, and they are not mutually exclusive. They are definitely designed to solve different problems. PLCs typically for a real-time control has interlocking capabilities, ladder, or any other language programming capabilities, while Fluke is really, the FlukeDeck devices are really designed for data acquisition, number one, very accurately, I think much more accurately than any PLC, at least I'm aware of, at a very fast rate and in a very easy way and integrated way with the FlukeDeck software. And again, they are not mutually exclusive. You could link FlukeDeck to the DEC devices from Fluke and to PLCs and combine this information in reports and on the screen at the same time.
Sure.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay.
So another question here, who should we contact to get pricing information about FlukeDeck and the devices? I think I have the answer here, right, Fluke? Right, Bruce?
No, that is it. That's the correct answer.
Okay, so here's the contact information for Bruce Fuller and my contact information as well. feel free to contact either of us, but officially Fluke Deck, definitely the hardware and also the Fluke Deck software is sold directly by Fluke, and Bruce will be able to provide any pricing information or channels information where you can get Fluke Deck or the hardware for your needs and for your projects.
Yeah, and just as a point as we close out, if you go to our website, which is simply flukecal.com, you can go through to the 2638 page, and you'll find that there's a download of this Fluke Deck software there for you to try, if you'd wish to do that.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruce. And we are reaching here the top of the hour. I think we addressed the questions we have. So at this point, Bruce, I'd like to thank you very much again for your time and for the presentation, and thank every and each one of you for your time as well. We appreciate your attendance, and hopefully the webinar provided useful information to you. If you have any questions in the future, as always, feel free to contact us. And I hope to see you again in the next webinar. Thank you, everybody, and thank you again, Bruce, for your time.
Sure. Thank you, Fabio, and thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.